First, I'd like to apologize for the length of this video. Yeah, it's a long one. It is the last one, so I had a lot to cover. For those of you who are familiar with the car and the build to date, you can kind of fast forward through maybe the first half. The second half, I get into a little bit more of a recap on my impression of the build, as well as some driving experiences. Enjoy. So here we are. This is my final video, at least with the build part. I'm going to do some videos of me driving. Speaking of driving, the video you just saw was really my first drive in this car, and that was a local road here that goes to the town north of me here in Maine. And I've got a road very similar that goes to the south of me, so I got some great driving here, very locally. But I think on that clip I turned about 20 miles on the odometer, so that really was my first little kind of jaunt. I had a blast, you know, and I'm going to get into driving impressions kind of towards the end of this video. First, I want to go into the car itself, some of the things I've done. I'm going to do some walk around, talk a little bit about why I did some of the things I did. I'm going to talk a little bit about things I wished I had done differently. Certainly some stuff that I wished I had known going into it. And then some overall impressions of the build process. You know, this is a weird feeling for me. You know, this is, quite frankly, it's kind of a weird, kind of a sad feeling almost to have wound up and finished this project. For the past, 20, 30 years, most of my adult life, at least, I've dreamed about building my dream car and kind of imagine what it'd be like to build a car like this. And here I am, wrapped up. I'm done. I know you're never really done with these cars, and I know there's people out here that have hundreds of thousands of miles in these cars. So they're going to have, obviously, they're probably smiling right now thinking, haha, he thinks he's done. I understand that. I know I'll never be done with it, but I'm done to the point where it's aligned, it's registered, it's inspected. Every part of this car works. I drive it, and I have no problems as of yet. I think as of right now, I have about 100 miles on the car. So these are really early driving impressions that I'll get into a little bit later on. So let's move into the car itself, and I'll do a quick walk around and talk about some of the stuff I've done. So before I get to the walk around, I want to just make a quick mention that pretty much all of the custom work I did in this, and by custom I mean the parts of the car that weren't part of the kit, parts that I couldn't buy, things that I really had my own designs for. I actually pre-designed all of these in CAD before I even got my kit. I had the whole car rendered, and well, as best I could, but all the parts at least that I was going to build, I had those rendered. I even ended up making some of the dash forms before I even received the car based on some dimensions I had gotten my hands on. So a lot of what you're seeing here was designed well before I received the car. So let's kind of dive right into this, and I'm going to start with the nose of the car, just to keep things organized here. And I'm going to hope I don't forget some of the stuff I've done, but let's, when I've got some notes here too, so that'll help me kind of cover everything. So I guess the first thing, let's talk about the engine. And what I chose for this car, and I'm going to go ahead and open it up so you can see it here. And while I'm opening it up, I'm going to show you how I open it up. I opted to not do the handles. I wanted it a little, generally I wanted the whole car a little understated, I guess. And then you can see by the color, lack of stripes. There's a lot of stuff that's not Cobra-like in this. It almost, to some extent, and I'll take a quick step back here, has a slightly more maybe European vibe to it. That wasn't a goal, it's just kind of how it turned out, but it was the image I had in my head that I realized after I did it that it kind of came to be. But so this is how I open it up. I have this little key and it unlocks it. Go around to the other side. Unlock this. So this is a little challenging with one hand, but there we go. So I have a Ford Racing 302, Boss 302 crate motor. I got this from Mike Forte. He built it. I bought the motor and transmission as a package from him. He is wonderful to deal with. I don't have enough good things to say about Mike. He was completely understanding of the fact that I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to cars, and certainly not the motors. I got a general idea of what it's supposed to do, but generally, I really don't know anything about them. So he was understanding and did a great job. So Ford 302, it dynoed at 358 horsepower. I had no idea or no way of translating that number to performance or how I'd feel. I just know I didn't really feel the need for a big horsepower motor. When I get into some driving impressions, I'll tell you my thoughts on how that number, those numbers translates to driving experience. So while I'm under here, I'm going to talk a little bit about my exhaust. This was a relatively polarizing choice amongst those who've kind of followed the video and have commented on it, and some of the old timers that will know more about these cars than I'll ever know. Yes, I was concerned about the heat, and so real quickly, what I did is I built an exhaust, a muffler in the nose piece, and that's that triangular looking piece there. And I'm not going to go into great detail about that because you can look at my video on how I built it, but it sits under the nose piece. The plumbing, headers, standard headers there, and they feed into an X pipe. The X pipe was a way for me to kind of tone down the exhaust note a bit, mellow it out, and it worked. This thing sounds great. It meets every one of my expectations. Quiet, relatively quiet. Quiet's not a great word. Not obnoxious loud, I'll say that. My wife loves it, so there you go. That's a win. So feeds into there, and then into the muffler, goes in and out, and then the exhaust vents right there. So I am very, very happy to report that I am not getting any heat issues. The car, I've run it pretty hard. We've had some hot days here. I've run it hard, and the temp does not seem to climb over about a $1.90, $1.95 once when I was sitting in traffic, but seems to be no issues. Fan shroud, I'm sure, helped that scenario a bit. That was a fan shroud I made. I had to build my own because there wasn't one available because of my muffler. I needed to angle the fan shroud a little differently. I'm also very happy to report that I am getting no exhaust fumes. in the cockpit. And it was a concern, kind of. It was a concern based on a lot of the comments I was getting that I might run into that as an issue. Zero smell at any speed, highway speed, idle speed, in and out of town, nothing. A big part of that is the fact that this is a dummy. This is the exhaust, keeps those exhaust gas at a higher velocity, puffs way out to here someplace. You know, I can see it moving the grass next to my driveway, so pushing far enough away from the car where no exhaust smell. Sorry to harp on that, but that was a big concern of mine. Let's see, what else in the motor? I don't think there's anything else unique in this motor that I've done other than the exhaust. That's all there. So, I'll close this up while I'm at it. Talk about my hood scoop a little bit. So, I took the stock Factory 5 hood scoop, which is I believe an ABS style plastic, and I used it to create a fiberglass mold, made that mold into this shape you see here. And because I got rid of my side vents, again in an attempt to kind of simplify the look of the outside of the car here, I got rid of the side vents, which concerned me about ventilating heat, exhausting heat out of the engine bays. So I decided to mold some steel mesh, or perforated steel, in the shape. I didn't want to detract from the original hood scoop. I love the way those original hood scoop, the lines go, so I formed the metal to kind of continue that scoop around the corner. And it works. You know, at idle, you can put your hand here and feel the heat just kind of billowing out. So seems to be working pretty well. I'm happy with the way it turned out. No issues with cracking yet or any of that mess. It's rigid. It's, you know, it's almost a 1/4 inch thick. Of fiberglass, so I'm happy with the way that came out. While I'm on the outside real quick in the front of the car, I did different mirrors. These are a mirror I found on a website for Mazda Miatas, but it's a fairly common mirror. You can get them at Summit Racing has them. They're called smoothie mirrors. And the lines just seem to work with this car. They're almost shaped like the rear hips. So love the way they look. Provide a little bit better view than maybe the stock bullet mirror or some of the other mirrors. There are better mirrors. The ones that are larger diameter that clip onto the windshield, I'm sure perform better, but these seem to be just fine so far. Keep my fingers crossed there. And kind of move around to the very front of the car here. I did go to an LED style light. They are different looking. I like the way they look. Couple of little things. I did paint in the trim ring, the body color, which I really like, and I do like to see hints of chrome here and there. I think they need little hints of chrome, and so I left the ring, this bezel here, chrome, and I kind of like that transition here. Again, I'm not trying to hide the fact that this is an old car. I want people to, or old style. I want to see some chrome here and there. The front mesh, I did perforated steel there. On each one of the openings, I made a wooden buck and beat the crap out of it until I got a nice hard lip around the outside edge that snapped on the inside of the body. This piece you can see here is held in with screws, and then the bottom unit there, and there, those are epoxied in. Let's see, where else am I here? Let's move on to the interior. So the interior obviously is very different. This is not anything, nothing of this interior relates to what you'd expect to see in a stock Cobra. I had a lot of fun putting this together. Again, this was something I had modeled both in my head and in CAD well before the kit even showed up. And I wanted to look a little old school. I wanted to look a little British, maybe, I don't know. But perforated steel here, kind of reminiscent. Well, it is the same steel as the dash and the grill, but kind of looks like it belongs. I hope. I like it. I chose these gauges here. I wanted, again, a more simple dash, So I have these 2 gauges. These are decoded digital. I love the way they look. They seem to give me all the information I need at a glance. I don't know if, I don't feel like I'm missing anything by reducing the number of gauges. All the information's there. I'm super happy with those. Did kind of the same tunnel cover that a lot of people do. They end up vinyling that or putting carpeting it differently, I guess. But I put my key under there. You know, I think that's something I'm going to change. The edges are too hard. I'm going to make something that's a little smoother and a little more integrated. But that'll wait till probably this winter, so I can just keep this thing on the road and keep driving it. Let's stay in the interior here. Cubby, I did the cubby. I opted to do a different, made my own flange for the outside of that cubby. I was having a really hard time getting the edge banding or that edge guard to snap over the carpet, and I tried a bunch of different profiles. I just couldn't get it clean enough, and I've seen examples where people have gotten it just perfect. I could not do that, so I ended up making it that way. I chose a standard 3-point seatbelt. You know, it clicks in like every seatbelt in your daily driver would. Honestly, this may have been even easier to install than the stock seatbelts that come with the car. Literally 15 minutes, and they just bolt into the stock locations. The retractor portion bolted inside the trunk to the existing tab there that's used in the stock seatbelt. So super simple to do. Pretty happy with that. Turn signal, I don't know why I get such a kick out of the turn signal, but here it is. You can kind of see it there. It's a long lever. I just used a switch, turned this little piece of aluminum, glued it, and epoxied it on top of the switch. And now it presents like a regular turn signal switch. And I don't know, if I'm $3.50 into that, I'd be surprised. Definitely happy. Really easy to drive. Kind of no thought needed. A couple other little things here. I've got interior dash lights. I have a light inside the cubby there that kind of sprays light all over the entire inside of the dash. Then under the lights are underneath in the footwells as well. Not all that exciting. Headlight, horn, heater, defroster right there, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I have a spare switch that I'm not quite sure what that's going to be, but I had 5 holes there I needed to fill it. My defroster, real quickly, is just a small vent there. I used a very small little 12-volt fan that pulls air directly from the engine bay. I've tried this a couple times, and a fair amount of hot air comes puffing out of this thing. So on those early cool drives where the windshield has a tendency to fog up, you're living on the seacoast, it's very damp in the early mornings. And I had a Jeep, and one of the issues I'd always have is the inside of the windshield would fog up or condense on some of those cooler mornings, damp mornings, and just a little bit of heat coming out of the defroster would fix that. And I'm expecting this will work the same way. While I'm here, let's go into the seats. Seats are pretty straightforward. Didn't do anything special with the seats, other than I did make my own bracket to secure the seats that elevated the front of the seats about 1 inch. So the whole seat kind of tilts back. Makes it a little more comfortable to drive. I spent some time kind of tweaking that, and I know there are lots of kits you can buy. One of the reasons I did it myself is I wanted the ability to make an adjustable seat, but without raising my seat height. So there's 2 sets of bolts going through here. So when if I want to adjust it forward for my wife, and I put her in here and measured it, 3 bolts, it slides forward, I tighten 3 bolts again, and now it's suitable for her to drive. And she's excited to drive this as well. So that worked out pretty well. Roll bar, oh boy. So this was a big one. It's funny, of all the, and I think I mentioned this in some of my earlier videos, of all the parts design-wise, this one spent more time rattling around in my head than I think any other. I think in part because it's such a profound change to the way this car looks. And the roll bar was definitely challenged my metal fabrication skills. So this is a full steel roll bar. It's 1 inch DOM, 1 inch by 1/8 inch wall DOM tubing. that I bent, and you can kind of see in the video, if you're interested, kind of look back in the video, because I do cover it in great detail on how this was built. It's kind of step by step, but it's basically this 1-inch DOM tubing. The whole thing is then wrapped in 16 gauge sheet steel. Incredibly rigid, it ain't going on anywhere. I made mounts that bolted into the stock factory 5 mounts that adapted it to this arrangement here, so everything kind of bolts right to the chassis with no issue there. My third tail light, yeah, I'm damn proud of this one. This I don't know why I'm so proud of this, but maybe just because of the amount of work it took. One of the reasons I wanted to put this style roll bar in, I guess I'll take a step back. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is, again, I wanted to simplify the way the car looked, and the factory roll bars that come on these, I think, are iconic and amazing to look at. They are a big part of what makes this car so unique. But I always wanted to do something a little different that was a little more integrated and a little simpler on the eye. And I think I got there. I hope I got there. But so back to my third taillight, the one I'm so damn proud of. So I wanted a third taillight that did not look like it was stuck on. And I really wanted a third taillight for the simple fact that this color is a kind of a muted brown color. The car sits ridiculously low until you're actually in and around one of these. You don't realize how low they sit. And then the tail lights are so low to begin with that from a visibility standpoint, it's always made me nervous about getting rear-ended. And this rear tail light is obnoxiously bright. Each one of those little LEDs are, they're individual LEDs, and I built the assembly that houses those 7 LEDs. I'm sure I'm probably going to tick some people off behind me, especially at nighttime, because this thing is blinding, but I'm okay with that. I just don't want people to run into the back of me. So yeah, that's the story on the roll bar. I'm going to, pardon me while I just look at my notes real quick. I feel like I'm missing some stuff here. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff here. Let's see. Well, I think I'm pretty much ready to, oh, actually a couple other little things. So I have in the back here, you can see, again, like I've said 1,000 times already, in an attempt to keep the car a little simpler looking on the outside, I did not do bumpers. I didn't even do the quick jacks. I just used, in this case, a 1/2-inch stainless steel bolt that I turned down to look a little more finished. And then right below it is an extremely bright LED, and that's my reverse light. And it works really well, and it doesn't really detract from the way the back end of the car looks, at least in my opinion. Man, I love seeing a license plate on this. Probably shouldn't show you the numbers. Maybe I'll block those off, although I don't know what those numbers would get anybody. Let's see, what else? So paint, ooh, this is a big one. I painted this myself, and I have never painted a car. I've done fiberglass work in the past in fabrication, some of the model making I've done, and some of the industrial design projects I've been involved with, which is kind of one of my past lives here. I did a fair amount of fiberglass work, but never any type of automotive painting. And I made a little spray booth in here, 10x20 spray booth in my garage. It just fit, created some ventilation, and sprayed this thing. And then got the primer on, color on, super careful about keeping things cleaned. And then did, let's see, 4 coats of clear. And I did 4 coats because I was fairly sure I was going to get a lot of orange peel, which meant I was going to be doing a lot of sanding post paint to get rid of that orange peel. And man, I was right. This thing looked like a big brown orange. And I, wet sanded and polished and sanded again and sanded some more, and ended up getting this to a finish that I'm really happy with. And I love the color. I got to give big shout out to my wife for picking this color and kind of steering me in this direction. This is a Porsche brown color. It's called Tobacco Brown. It's a 70s Porsche color. You know, after all this work, polishing and all the body work, again, I'd never done body work either, and the trick is you just take your time, and while you're sanding they're not seams that are in these cars, they're actually mold release parts. This whole body fiberglass body is one piece, but the form that makes it is in multiple pieces, which allows them to pull the part out of the form. Those seams are a challenge. They kind of hold some embedded wax. You got to be careful with that, because that wax, I'm assuming, would rear its ugly head well after you've painted it, and then you're kind of screwed. But you know, in the body work, I just took my time and just kind of kept going at it, and a lot of it comes down to block sanding and learning how to block sand, and kind of quickly you learn what doesn't work when you're block sanding. You know, use the stiffest block you can possibly. One piece of advice I have, and I'm in no position to give advice on body work, but the one piece of advice I have is that use the stiffest sanding block you can do that still rounds the corners, because then you're basically planing, and you're cutting, and you're creating a shape, as opposed to letting the car dictate that shape, and that's when you run into situations where the seams kind of telegraph through the paint. So I couldn't be happier with the paint. I honestly, never in my wildest dreams did I think my own painted car would look this good. Now, there are flaws, believe me. I see them every time I look at the car. There are some areas that I wished I had seen earlier, and they're not going to show up on camera, but there's a couple of pinholes. You really got to hunt for them, but they're there, and of course it's something you see because it's your own paint job. I ended up painting the rims. These are the Factory 5 rims. I painted them a gunmetal gray, a little darker than I think I had anticipated, but in the end I do really like them. It's the same gray as the roll bar, so, and the same gray as the front grills. So I'm happy with those. Let's see, what else? Let's dive into driving impressions here. This video has just gotten long. I'm sorry. Let's dive into driving impressions. Let me flip the camera around for that, so you can see the big dumb smile on my face. Okay, before we dive into the driving impression, I knew there was something I was forgetting. It's my oh shit handles, and these are a couple of handles I made. They match the steering wheel. This was based on kind of practicing getting in and out of this thing, and I know a lot of people like to grab on, or there's a tendency to feel like you can grab onto the windshield. That is a definite no-no to get in and out of this thing, so I wanted to make sure that I kind of made that easier. And sure enough, man, these handles are great. They really help. You know, you kind of lean in, you put your hand on that point, and then you swing your body around. Greatly simplifies getting in and out of this, especially for the passenger, because I've got the steering wheel to grab onto. My passenger doesn't. The other part too is during driving, it's a nice thing for the passenger to kind of hold on to if you're a little unsure of what's coming. And I like the way they look. They kind of brought a little old school flavor back to the car. So yeah, those are my oh shit handles. Very robust. They bolt right to the chassis, right to the frame. So all is good there in terms of strength. Okay, now we can get to driving impressions. So I'll talk a little bit about my first, how driving the car feels, and also the registration portion of it, getting the VIN assigned as well. So first, let's start off with the VIN number. The way it works in the state of Maine, at least, and I think this is fairly common, is the state will send out an inspector, and they do a quick kind of once-over in the car, but primarily they're making sure that none of the parts are stolen. At least this is what the inspector told me. Her job was to just verify that all my paperwork kind of matches up with the car. Certificate of origin from Factory 5, all the receipts I showed, kind of went through those. Not in great detail, but at a glance, she wanted to see that pretty much everything was in order there. And then we bolted the VIN number on. Once you get the VIN number, now you can go get it registered. In the state of Maine, there is like most states, even though you pay sales tax, which I bought this and picked it up in Massachusetts at Factory 5, paid their sales tax, paid the motor and tranny sales tax down in Mass as well. And then in the state of Maine, I had to pay excise tax, which was still a hefty chunk, but it's based on what you paid for the parts. So, you know, when you kind of add everything up, then they base the excise tax off of that. But this is not a normal thing for anybody to do at the state level or the town level, so you got to be a little patient and walk them through it. It also took some me being a bit of a nag to get the VIN inspector out here. It's a tough time of year. I think a lot of people are trying to do that in the spring. So my one piece of advice there is start early. I didn't. I started calling about a week before I knew the car was going to be ready for inspection, and I probably should have done that a month before, because all said and done, it took about 6 weeks to get the VIN number. And that's 6 weeks I could have been driving if I had been a little smarter about it. Then the inspection and the registration, all that part was all the same. Everything worked great. I got my four-wheel alignment. Oh, here's a tip for you on getting the car aligned. And you can avoid doing what I had to do, which is to get the car aligned twice. Right when I got the car on the wheels, I did a height adjustment, got all four corners of the car at the right height, and that, and then I did not have the opportunity to do any type of go-karting in my neighborhood, because I live in a fairly busy road, but my driveway is about 60 feet long, 70 feet long, so I could kind of go back and forth on that. But I couldn't really get any time on this car before alignment. And so here's what happened. I had the car, like I said, adjusted the height on the car. All four corners were at the right height, plus or minus an eighth of an inch, something like that, as close as I could get it. I then, as soon as I got the car registered, I limped it down to our local Ford dealership, and they did an alignment for me. Aligned, drove great, got it home, and noticed that the rear driver's side was sitting a little low, and so was the front passenger side. And I realized, actually all of it was sitting a little low. I realized that the springs had sagged a bit, and I knew this was going to happen. I don't know why I didn't give it a little longer before I got an alignment. But as soon as you adjust the ride height, then you have to get it realigned, and that's what I did. So I adjusted the ride height, and it was a 1/4 inch plus off, 1/2 inch off, and maybe 3/8 off on that right rear. So things had kind of settled a bit. So then I had to get it realigned, because as soon as you change the height, you have to get it realigned. So here's a tip for you. If you can put off alignment till after you can kind of drive around a little bit and let things settle, I would do it. Okay, driving impression. When I first decided to, there's a fly in here, I'm not waving you guys off, there's a fly in here. When I first started kind of getting serious about getting one of these cars, I didn't know what to do for motor, and I was pretty sold on Coyote. I did have an opportunity to ride in one, and it just felt scary fast to me, to the point where I could never imagine myself needing that much power. There are a lot of those out there that are fine with that and crave that and love every ounce of it, and are probably way better drivers than I'll ever be. But for the kind of driving I do, I just couldn't see myself needing that much. Needs a funny word with any part of this car, right? But and then I spent some time talking to Mike Forte, and he said that this Ford Racing 302 crate motor is such a nice match for this car. It's it's an easier engine to work around, and that was paramount to me, because again, I designed this muffler, this exhaust system, to be in the nose of the car, so I needed access there. But it's an old school look. It fits the engine bay nicely. It's got that old school sound to it, that kind of uneasy idle, and it rumbles along nicely. From a power standpoint, I can't, granted, I'm 100 miles into this. Maybe that's going to change a little bit for me, but first gear, forget about it. You can't. There's no way you could ever give it all the juice in first gear, or even close to all the juice. In second gear, I haven't floored it yet, because I'm still kind of waiting for things to kind of burn in a little bit and break in. But in second gear, if you get into that pedal, you feel like the rear end's going to break loose, and it feels just ridiculously fast to me. And I'm sure that feeling will mellow as I own this car. But I just can't imagine ever needing more power. So that's me, and I know there's a lot out there that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles on these cars that are just kind of shaking their head like, yeah, a year from now he's going to wish he had more. Maybe, I don't know, I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. So very happy with the choice by Motor. It's, oh, and I don't know if I mentioned it's also a Sniper fuel injection, so I didn't want to deal with the carburation. Fuel injector for me is the way to go. I don't really have enough background in motors to be tweaking with carburetors, so I went in that direction. So my first driving impression, this car is crazy tight, and I can't tell you how surprised I am. There's no rattles, no squeaks, no looseness anywhere. It's digital steering. You know, I have manual steering, no power steering. This car feels digital in the way it turns. There's no body roll. You know, turning left or right or accelerating or braking is just a thought, you know, and it just happens. The brakes on this feel just amazing. I have, you know, manual brakes, no power assist, no power brakes. Everything about this car feels brand new in the way it drives. And I guess I'd envisioned, just because this is a car that I put together in my garage, that it'd be a little sloppy, but man, that is just not the case. I've never driven a car so visceral, so much fun. The shifting is also digital. You know, I have a T5 transmission in this, because that's all I needed with the 302. I didn't need to go to a beefier transmission. This T5 is just butter. It almost kind of finds the next gear for you, and it just completely adds to the fun of driving this. So on these back roads I have around here, you know, top speed is like 40 miles an hour, and I think maybe I hit 30, and it just felt fast. So my early driving impressions are just A+ straight across the board. There's not a single part that I find that I'd like different. Now, talk to me after, you know, 10,000 miles or 20,000 or 30,000 miles. I'm sure I'll have maybe some differing opinions, but right now it's nothing but big, stupid, shit-eating grin on my face every time I get in this thing and go ripping around town. Like I said, I'm only 100 miles into this, so take this for what it's worth. I guess I'll wrap this video up with saying that the overall experience of the purchase, the pre-conversations I had with Factory 5, the ordering part of it, the motor selection and conversations and transmission selection, the conversations I had with Mike Forte were just wonderful. The whole process was really great, and I bought this during a really ugly time. You know, I ordered this during COVID. We had supply chain issues, and still do to some extent, but I gotta hand it to Factory 5, man. They came through flying colors. And the odds were against them. I will say the odds were definitely against them. And there were some snafus. You know, you run into situations where you want a part and it's not here. When you buy these kits, you know, you don't get all the parts at once. It's not feasible on anybody's side. You know, you don't need all the parts at once, and Factory 5 to deliver all of those parts at once is kind of ridiculous as well. But what they do deliver early on is enough to keep you going for a long time. Now there are some exceptions to that, and I know there's some people out there throwing stuff at their computer screen right now listening to me, but there were a couple of parts that I missed that disrupted a bit of how I built this car, but I would say that those are minor, and there's always something else to do. There was never in a situation, I was never in a situation where, you know, if I'm missing a spindle, for instance, I did have a problem with my rear spindles. I got shipped 2 left-hand spindles instead of a left and a right, and that took about a month to correct. But you know, even then, so I can't finish that. I had all these other parts of the car I can work on, and that held true throughout the entire build. Missing nuts and bolts here and there. You're gonna miss some nuts and bolts. You can pick those up locally. It's nothing worth stressing out over. Just pick up a grade of bolt that you know is similar or equal to what was being used in the kit. There's nothing unique about this hardware. It's available universally. So with that said, I am going to tell you that I had an absolutely amazing experience building this car, soup to nuts, and I can't believe the build process is over. I am excited now to be able to drive this thing whenever I want, and as soon as the weather, when the weather's nice, I get in, start up, and just go. And I feel that I built a car that's going to do that for me. I am always anticipating issues. I know it's not going to be that smooth. I know there are going to be situations where I'm going to get in and it's not going to go. But having built this thing, I now have all sorts of confidence on repairing this thing. So I think that's kind of an interesting feeling. And I've never been in a car where I've had that type of confidence before. So that's an interesting feeling to have, actually, to know all the ins and outs of the car you built. Let's see, where do I go from here? I think the next step is to gain a little more confidence in learning to drive the car. One of the things that is, I think, important to note is the pedal box is narrow. Everybody complains about it until they maybe get used to it, and maybe some still do complain about it. But I have size 12 triple E plus feet. I have Fred Flintstone feet, and it's taking some time to get used to the pedals and not bumping the adjacent pedal. I've spaced them out as far as I could get them. That helped. I built in a foot box extension. That's helped. I still bump the brake. I still bump the clutch. I still bump things a little bit down there. Shoe selection's helping, but I'm learning it, and if I'm comparing now to the first 10 miles I put on it, it's infinitely better. So that's just throw that note out there. But all in all, hey, I had a great experience. I thoroughly enjoyed filming all of this. Didn't think I'd like that part of it, but I did. And I'm very sorry for this very long video, but it's the last one, so suck it up. You won't have to listen to me anymore. I will be doing some filming through some interesting drives. I've got planned as soon as like I said, get a little more confidence in this. And if it ever stops raining, if any of these dry states want to hire me to get rain going for them, I guess I just have to build a convertible in that state, because this is ridiculous. If you're in New England, you know what I mean right now. We've had weeks and weeks of just rain. So as soon as it stops raining and I get a little more confidence in the car, I'm going to head to the mountains with my wife. We're going to do some drive through the White Mountains, and I'll try to film some of that because I think it's interesting. Hopefully it's interesting for you guys. But with that, I'm going to wrap this up. So, keep an eye out for me in some future videos. But as far as build stuff goes, I think this is over until some sort of next project. And I got a few things cooking that I think you all might enjoy. So thanks, and and I truly appreciate all the comments I've gotten. A few of you out there, and you know who you are, have kind of saved me in a few situations in this car in terms of some of the mistakes I was making during the build, and they caught it in time for me to make the corrections. None of them were life or death kind of things, but would have caused some serious issues later on down the road. So thank you for those wonderful comments. And with that, Random Works is out of here. I'm just going to be driving from now on out and shooting some short videos along those lines. So thank you very much.